Welcome to the Recruitment Hackers Podcast, a show about innovations, technology, and leaders in the recruitment industry. Brought to you by TalkPush, the leading recruitment automation platform.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Recruitment Hackers Podcast. This is Max, and I'm today with Mr. Trent Cotton, Director of Talent Acquisition at BBVA, dialing in from Atlanta. Hi, Trent. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Max. Glad to be here.
Pleasure to have you. So we were discussing with Trent some of the big changes that happened in 2020, and we'll talk a little bit about BBVA's and your policy on diversity, and talk a little bit about AI, ML, and the recruiting sprints that you're running for your team. I think a lot to learn from our audience there. But before we get into all of that, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. I converted to the dark side of HR in 2004. I spent the first part of my career working through college as a banker. And in 2004, my daughter was two and a half, almost 3 years old. And, I just got tired of lending. I was like, a loan's a loan. And at the time I was managing 4 states for a mortgage broker and had, I think, 48 people that I was managing. And I said, I'm going to make a pivot. And took a contracting job with the bank working as a recruiter, and was trained by 6, I'm using air quotes, recruiters, but they were technically like HR people that just did recruiting. And I think that their sole purpose those first 6 months was to convince me that I would not like recruiting, I would be successful. And they almost got to my head. But the difference between me and them is that I could sit with an executive, a banking executive, and talk about, the size of the portfolio, yield spread, how the changes in the market, all that business stuff. And then I also, because I used to manage, I knew where to go and find the people. So just kind of progressed, and it's been a fun ride. I've done a lot of banking recruiting. There's nothing in the bank that I haven't recruited for. I've done some tech recruiting for a tech firm and did some healthcare recruiting, but now I manage a fantastic group of 28 people that keep me on my toes and keep me innovating. So, like I said, it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, recruitment, it's kind of like where people end up after sales. It hasn't worked out for some people, but there is a wonderful element of delivering someone a career, a stepping stone, a next step. But in your case, your timing was pretty good, right? Getting out of mortgages in 2007.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it was providential. Very. And that was the other thing that I realized is that I loved sales. And at the end of the day, that's all recruiting is. Just like a salesperson, you need to have a pipeline. You need to manage a portfolio of talent, and you've got to be able to close a deal working with both your internal client and the candidate. So at the end of the day, we are salespeople. I just think a little bit more highly refined. And what we do, it's harder because it's not like I'm trying to sell you a TV or sell you a product. I'm selling you an opportunity. And there's a certain level of finesse and intelligence that I think is paramount for somebody to be successful. But I agree with you. Whenever I'm looking for people to add to the team, the first thing I look for is, do they have that sales mentality and that portfolio management and development of a pipeline? And if they have all of that, then I can teach them the rest.
I'm a startup CEO building talent acquisition software. And when people ask me how we innovate, my answer is maybe a little bit uninspiring, but it's like, we just look at what sales and marketing does. And we know that it's coming into recruitment 3-4 years from now. So we start building it now, we'll be all right. And
That's
continuing
smart.
on your sales analogy, you were saying, recruitment is sales, which I agree with. In the sales universe, the size of the deal that you make will affect the composition of your team and the marketing to sales, mix. How much you're doing marketing. You're going to do more marketing with products that are a little bit cheaper, and you're going to do more sales, more hand-holding when the product is a little bit more expensive. And so if we apply that to recruitment, maybe when the sort of white glove recruiting service would only work up until a certain level, and then for everything else you'd have to have a different workflow and a different sales to marketing mix. Does that apply for you at BBVA?
It does. It does. So we've got the high volume on the branch side, and then we've got the professional and executive. And even within the professional and executive side, we've got kind of entry-level positions. So usually if I bring someone in, maybe they were a banker and they want to get into recruiting or HR, I'll take them on and either have them work in retail, which is high volume, or kind of the higher volume on the professional and executive side. That way they can get used to all the things that as recruiters we've got to be aware of, the HR laws, what to do, what not to do, kind of develop a process. And then as they progress and as they learn to source and as they develop that acumen, to me, there's a different level for the level of search that I work on versus someone that's working on maybe a mid-level. There's not a lot. I mean, at its core, it's the same, but how I have to go about it is a little bit trickier. Because most of the time, if you're trying to get an executive, there's a different type of wooing that you do than someone that's a middle executive. To me, it's just a different approach. So it's almost like car sales is not a good idea. Right idea, Daddy. Because I was trying to think of how you would, market. But I do think that maybe car sales is kind of your run-of-the-mill basic model. That there's a client out there for it, and you need to market to them specific to that audience. But if I'm selling Bentleys or something like that, I have a totally different target market, totally different networking, and that's a different level client, different ego that I have to deal with versus someone that's just coming in, hey, I just need a car. It doesn't have to be new. It doesn't have to have even power windows. I just need it to crank and get me where I need to go. So it's all about knowing your audience. And I think at the core, that's what sales is all about. Knowing your audience and being able to find the right need for them at the right time.
You and I have a commercial bend. And so if we ever start looking for a job, you and I, Trent, I mean, we're just going to use our sales experience, right? We're going to start looking into our network and like finding the job that's right for us. At the level that you're describing, these kinds of bank executives, I would assume that they would also be able to like find their own jobs to a certain degree. Do you find that to be the case, or you still need to do a lot of hunting?
Still need to do a lot of hunting. They can go and find their own job if they wanted to, because it's a very tight-knit network at the top. But the difference is that sometimes they're so busy or they're so entrenched with their own company that my job is just to get them to lift their head up and say, okay, is there something else that you might want to do? Or are there competencies that you're doing in your current job that could be transferred over into this job that you never even knew existed, or an area that you never even thought about exploring? So a lot of mine is selling them on the opportunity. And then once I sell them, then I've got to evaluate them and make sure that they qualify. Where I think it's a little bit on the flip side on the entry level, you don't necessarily have to sell them on the job. It's making sure that they meet the qualifications, they're a good cultural fit, and it's the right time for them to make a move. And then you sell them on the brand. So it's a different sales process, in my opinion, or at least that's what I've seen.
Well, I'm thinking you might start something in their head, a career shift, and they may not end up working for you, but they may still take you up on your advice if you do it well. That could be like a side metric you could start tracking is how many of those people we're having conversations with, we managed to influence their career. Hard one to track, but you were saying before we got started, you were talking about the AI and ML transformation initiatives that you're working on. We, in my company, we apply AI mostly to engage with candidates at the front of the funnel and answer their question and direct them to the right opportunity and then pre-screen them. In your world of managers and above, how can you apply AI there?
That's interesting, because you and I kind of geeked out a little bit about AI and ML prior to talking, and the first bias, if we were talking about this 18 months ago and I brought AI and ML up to maybe senior management and said, hey, this is something I want to do, I would have to get over the first hurdle of explaining what it was and explaining the efficiencies. So fast forward to today, they understand the efficiencies, but the questions you just asked is the first hurdle that I have to jump, because they go, well, what if a senior executive applies to a role and they get this AI thing? That's not the candidate experience that we want for them. And I mean, it all depends on the product. I've seen some products that are incredible. Whenever you interact with them, you actually forget that you're dealing with an AI. So I guess I struggle because most of the time that there is, once you get to a certain level, having people apply to that, it's very rare. And I guess maybe I'm so cynical that whenever they do apply, I'm going, okay, what are you running from? I don't get I kind of like the thrill of the chase. Right. But most of the time we're going out and bringing that talent in, and we can actually introduce and say, hey, there's going to be an AI that's going to ask you some follow-up questions. It can also answer any of the frequently asked questions about benefits, any kind of onboarding stuff. So it gives them, in my mind, it gives them an extra layer of that white glove treatment that's available 24/7.
I like that. Yeah. It's easy to think that just because somebody's got 10, 15 years of experience that they have all the answers, but they've just probably got as many questions as the juniors. And, they maybe even the juniors would ask the question because they don't know, and vice versa, where somebody a little bit more experienced might be a little bit embarrassed to ask, but the questions are just as important. So the AI then would service the same, primarily a candidate experience and engagement layer to prepare them for the possibility of working at your company.
Yes, definitely. Because it's still part of the brand experience. And that's the thing that's been so impressive to me, doing some demos with AI assistants, just trying to kind of explore over the next 12 to 24 months, how can we as an organization implement this to increase the efficiency, but also enhance that candidate experience. And I think that whenever people are talking about AI and trying to sell it internally, or even whenever companies come out to me and want to do a demo, I always say, do you ever bring up the fact that this is a fantastic candidate experience? You're missing a golden opportunity if you're not, because that's a huge selling point for me. In my mind, I own the candidate experience for everyone who applies with my firm. If I have an AI out there that's constantly showing them videos, sending them messages, and maybe they start the application process and they stop because they need to go cook dinner or something like that, and that assistant goes and continues to engage them, sure. That, in my mind, is a fantastic experience for the candidate, but it also creates so much efficiency for my team, because I cannot wait for the day that the 28 people on my team come in and they have a day that's been booked for them while they were asleep or enjoying their family. The job just posted, that AI goes in, parses out the necessary information, sources internally and externally, evaluates them. Once they're ranked, puts, we set a minimum limit saying, okay, anybody that makes 85 and above, go ahead and book them on my calendar. I mean, how cool would it be, to think that, 10 years ago, this was just like far-fetched, but we are in the grasp of being able to have recruiters come in and have 7 or 8 qualified, not just qualified candidates booked, but also to be able to have a 360 view outside of the resume. I mean, it's just absolutely intoxicatingly exciting. I totally geek out on
I was a recruiter like you in 2005, and I don't know what attracted you to this.
We didn't have Google. Yeah, whenever I did it, we didn't have Google. I tell some of my new team members, they're like, oh, this Boolean stuff is so hard. I was like, oh, good God. I had a phone book. I remember getting new jobs because we had a large footprint. And so part of my intake was asking them to send me a phone book, so that way I could cold call some of the realtors to get mortgage bankers or some of the banks or whatever. And, now you've got all kinds of things that provide all kinds of contact. I mean, it's sitting right there, and it's just mind-boggling to me, the transformation that's done in 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And that adrenaline, dopamine hit that you used to get from finding a profile that might be a good fit, that's how you're wired, Trent. But I do think that that's going to phase out over the years, because sourcing will be more and more automated, and that dopamine hit will have to come from a later point in the process, which will be, the candidate expresses an interest in, says, I'm going to take the offer. I don't know. It'll come just a little bit further probably, because the volumes are just constantly increasing. The ease of access of data is increasing. And I imagine that your bank has also experienced an increase in applicants over the last few months. you're tracking that?
It's been rather steady, believe it or not. In the U.S., the impact of Corona has been, it depends on the market. We have some markets that, they act like Corona doesn't even exist. It's business as usual. And then we have others that were hotspots. And
Georgia was a little bit like...
Yeah. Atlanta, we got shut down, I think, 3 or 4 times under like an executive order. And I think it was a fun 2 weeks where the governor said the state's reopen and our mayor goes, And so there were like all kinds of memes that said, what is it? Dad said I could go outside and our mayor is female. And it says, but mama said no, So the rest of Georgia was out and traveling and the rest of us, in Atlanta just locked down.
So confusing.
But yeah,
mommy and daddy are arguing.
Oh yeah. So it was quite fun just to kind of sit back and watch. But we're starting to see candidate flow increase a little bit, but we did not really see a major impact in the amount of candidates. What we have seen an impact is in some of the critical areas that we need to hire. The market has become so incredibly competitive. In the banking world, from an economic standpoint, in the U.S., mortgage is hot right now. And I mean, an underwriter in the U.S., a mortgage underwriter could just about name their price. And if they're good, a bank will pay it and probably give them a sign-on bonus. And that's some of the compression that we're seeing in the U.S., not the applicant flow. We're really having to go on the hunt. And we can find people who are qualified, but then we're competing against things that sometimes are, I've seen offers and I just go, they're offering what? How is that bank even making money? So there's a little bit of a frenzy in some of the key competencies.
Yeah, I've certainly heard a number of sectors where the volumes have gone down, like in retail and in healthcare, and where people don't want to come to a physical office for health concerns.
Right.
And I think that there's also limited mobility because people are kind of looking for safety and security, and so less likely to hop jobs right now, which may limit your ability to do your work, right?
Very.
Wait for things to look a little bit more rosy post-election.
Yes, we'll see after the election.
Yeah.
And then I think we'll see after the first of the year. So, but the thing for us is, kind of how we do recruiting. Corona was a fantastic stress test for us because it was working. We had just rolled it out throughout the entire bank, and then Corona came, and it really forced our clients to rank in terms of priority which jobs are most critical over the 2-week period. And so I guess that's why I stumble a little bit about candidate flow and all of that, because how we view metrics are completely different because of how we recruit. So whenever I'm on whenever I'm talking to people in TA, they go, what's your time to fill? I'm like, I don't know. It's not, we measure it, but it's not the driving metric. And it's, especially if we're on video, I like to kind of watch their mind. It's almost like looking at a computer. You see the little time clock turning. It's like they're trying to process, time to fill. You don't even look at it. No, we don't. We look at the priority roles and how many we close within the within the sprint. What we found in 2018. So I'd been in recruiting since 2004. And it was one of the first times since I got into recruiting that I actually stopped and I said, am I doing what I need to be doing? Is this really, am I passionate about this anymore? I was managing a smaller team at the time. I was dealing with the same customer comments. You're not getting enough candidates, not enough qualified candidates. It's taking too long to fill. And then, the recruiters are going, the managers aren't doing this. And I felt more like a daycare owner than I did, a team lead for a recruiter. And about that time, our bank was going through agile transformation. So I got to spend a week learning the Kanban or Kanban, depends on how you want to say it, learning that process.
I don't speak
and
Japanese.
It kind of started,
Kanban,
yeah.
Okay. So applying
Kanban,
Kanban to recruiting, right? Sorry,
applying Kanban to recruiting. So that was kind of our beta. But then I went through the agile methodology training for about a week and a half and listened to Jeff Sutherland's book on Scrum. And I was doing like a 4 or 5 hour drive and I was listening to the book. And there were so many times I went, holy shit, there it is. That's what I've been looking for. And so as a group, we identified that there are 4 pitfalls in traditional recruiting. Everything's a priority, which means nothing's a priority. The lack of feedback, the overanalysis, paralysis, FOMO, whatever you want to call it, that hiring managers have that makes them want to interview 25 people for, an hourly job. We were also misaligned with our client because there were so many times I'd sit down with the executive and go, we filled 48 jobs in 2 weeks, or, 48 jobs last month. And on average, you only have 16 openings. Why are you complaining? Well, those weren't the most critical ones. Well, how do we know which was critical and which wasn't? So there was a lot of misalignment. And then 2, we instituted WIP limits, or work in progress limits. And what that did is it allowed us to be able to kind of keep that process going. So now whenever our team comes in, they've got a dashboard, they're open recs. Every 2 weeks we call them sprint owners, product owners, whatever. It can be the executive for a line of business or their designate.
But it's not,
essentially I'll sit down and go, hey.
The sprint owner is not going to be someone from your team. It'll be the hiring manager typically.
It's the client. The client drives the priority.
Yeah.
So the 4 principles is feedback. It's kind of like the gas in the car. It keeps the process going. WIP limits keep us focused. And then the business drives the priority. And what we do is I'll sit down and go, hey, Max, your entire department, you've got 20 openings. And we're going to go, and the other thing that we instituted, of course, was a sprint. It forces a lot of efficiency. So Max, you've got 25 positions. You've got 100 points or $100, however you want to think about it. Over the next 2 weeks, what is mission critical in terms of jobs that I've got to fill? And so what you'll do is you'll go through, you've got 25 jobs. You can't, do like 4, 4, 4, 4. Because we won't let you. We usually say we need at least 2 jobs that equal, north of 35 or 40 points. So that way we're forcing them to say what is most critical. And so you'll go through and you'll prioritize. Now, those that are without points, we still work them, but it's in order. We're going to work that in, the 50-pointer first, the 15 next, and then the next 10s and the 5s. And then once we have everything going in the right way there, then we move on to the others that don't have points. So as a recruiter, I can come in and I can look at my dashboard, and let's say I cover 7 different divisions, and it can be incredibly overwhelming. For each of those 7 divisions, I know what their priorities are, and it's already stacked up on my report. And so what I'll do is I'll look at my 50-pointer. Where am I in that? And so that's where the WIP or work in progress limits come into play. So we created 3 different swim lanes: the recruiter interview sourcing lane, the hiring manager submitted, means I just submitted you a resume, I'm waiting on feedback, and then the hiring manager interview. And so what our goal is to have a max of 5 interviewing with the manager, 5 waiting on them to have some kind of feedback, and then maybe have 2 or 3 in my back pocket. Once I hit that WIP limit on that 50-pointer, I move on to my next one. And so whenever COVID hit, we shut down our branches, did drive-through only, and a branch manager. We did that for, I think, about a month and a half. And it was interesting to me because this is high volume and we came to a screeching halt, but it really forced the executive to say, okay, I need a minimum of 4 people in that office for it to run.
Yeah.
This office over here has 2. This office over here has 3. So this one is a 50, that one's a 40. And the recruiters were able to spend more time on the critical roles than just trying to take some easy hits.
It would have taken them 3-4 months to adapt to the new normal.
Easy.
But with the sprints, it was clear that, how do we keep the lights on and change everything real fast, and to change the priorities without having to hold every project, try to centralize the decision making.
Yeah, but what's cool is we didn't change the priority. Our client owns that priority. Our job is to execute on it. And so I always tell the team, the points define success in the eyes of the client. So what we do is we'll track, what percentage of points do we get? So if the budget's 100 and we close 45, of course, that's 45%. We want to see an increase sprint over sprint. And if it decreases, then that's where, nobody can hide in sprint. So if we've hit our WIP limit and the managers have not given us 48 hours, or they have not given us feedback in 48 hours, we have rules of engagement where we go to the client and say, you are becoming an obstacle. How do we work together and get this done? Same thing on my side. If an executive calls and says, we don't have any candidates, if I look and I see that we're at our WIP limit, I go, no, we actually do. Have you talked to your manager? This is what I'm showing. Or, you're right, that's a 50-pointer. I need to get with, Susie Q, who's a recruiter, and find out what's wrong. Is it a sourcing issue? Is it a candidate flow? Do you need more resources? So we were able to move quicker, of course, more agile. It's kind of cliche to say, but we were a lot more flexible. So in our critical areas that had a huge hiring volume, we had others that were normally kind of our mainstays. They had stopped hiring and they were kind of evaluating budget. I was quickly able to move a lot of resources over and make sure that we were able to keep that level of client service that we want. And for the most part, we had a couple of glitches, but for the most part, it worked. And the thing that I loved is watching, because all 28 people report directly to me, which can seem overwhelming if you look at it on an org chart, but it's not, because they'll look as a team, where are the points? And if I've got capacity, I'm going to reach out to Veronica. Hey, are there any sprints, any jobs that have points that you don't have time for that I can take? And then they take it and they run with it. And so there are several times I'm in a one-on-one. Yeah. So that, to me, has created a lot of efficiency. So now my eye is going even more so to the AI, ML, and looking at products to say, how can we increase that funnel of candidates? Do it by eliminating the bias, which is one of the things I love about AI is removing that bias that all of us have. So increasing that funnel, but then also increasing that candidate experience, and thus increasing the efficiency of our recruiting team. So to me, it's just like hand in hand. You can't have one without the other.
If operations is running and the clients are kept happy, then you've bought yourself some room to do automation and to reinvent your process next year. And that makes a lot of sense. Sounds like you have a lot more to say on this sprint recruiting and this applying agile. And I myself am thinking about different environments where we could apply it outside of the banking world and how it would be adapted, maybe even in a high volume recruitment situation where clients are of a different nature, perhaps. We could have a follow-on discussion on this topic if you're interested. But in the meantime, where can people find out more about the sprint recruiting methodology? Do you have some visual resources that you can send them to?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So they can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's really easy, linkedin.com/Trent Cotton. And I've got a blog out there, blog website, sprintrecruiting.com. And I share a lot of just thoughts, things that we've discovered. Yeah, try. And I'm writing a book, and my goal by looking at my Kanban, if I keep up with everything that I should be doing, I should have it in the editor's hands in the first part of December and ready to release in January. But to your point, I've actually talked to a lot of companies outside of banking, and just how can you apply it, and is it the same? So for me, it's kind of a curiosity of going, okay, well, this works here. I wonder if it works in a different industry. So, I'm kind of doing some consulting on the side with them, just how do they implement it and trying to understand their recruiting process. And for me, it's fun because I also learn how does somebody outside of, I've worked out of other industries, but, how does healthcare take Sprint and apply it? But then what is healthcare doing that maybe we should do? There are some things that, some complexities that they have that we don't, and they're able to get around it. How? And how can we apply that competency here at the bank? So to me, it's just fun. I like to geek out whenever it talks about talent acquisition, the leadership development within TA, and of course, AI and ML.
So let's book another call, another interview to talk about the idiosyncrasies of hiring heads and hiring managers in different industries and the different ways that they can make us miserable.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yes.
Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
Trent, for sharing on this on the sprint recruiting methodology. And guys, you can connect on sprintrecruiting.com if I got that right, and on LinkedIn, Trent Cotton.
Yep.
And looking forward to reconnect, Trent.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much, Max.
That was Trent Cotton from BBVA telling us about sprint recruiting, and you could practically feel the excitement, the fact that there was too much to communicate in a 30-minute window. So I hope we'll get Trent back on the show, and I hope you'll investigate this sprint recruiting concept and how it can apply to your world. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and share. We look forward to seeing you back on the Recruitment Hackers Podcast.